ANC Youth League President Collen Malatji has hit back at SACP General Secretary Mapaila over his Government of National Unity comments. He says if Mapaila has a problem with the structure of the GNU, the SAPC must withdraw party deployees from government and contest the elections independently. Malatji made his remarks during the announcement of the Youth League's 80th anniversary, where its online journal was relaunched. Mapaila once again made headlines over his criticism of the GNU in a podcast last week, where he labelled the ANC as sellouts for their decision to work with the DA in the GNU. The ANC Secretary General Collen has since cautioned alliance partners to criticise the ANC in an appropriate manner. The ANC Youth League has relaunched its online journal, Humelang, which is aimed at creating meaningful and robust discourse among young people. However, Malatji used the opportunity to lambaste the man at the helm of the South African Communist Party. He further proposed that the ruling ANC should engage the EFF over the GNU.
If the Communist Party feels that they've got enough structures on the ground, they can assist us to bring back the 60% that we have lost. It was at 40%. Let it be. It will be good assistance on our side. It will assist us, but they must urgently withdraw all their employees, because you can't say why a GNU of sellouts when your national chair is there within the GNU of Government of National Unity. Now, it lacks a bit of constantly. But the Mapaila, we know that is a product of the Youth League and COSAS and many other structures of the movement. He's very brave. We know that he will, it's either he will agree with the ANC, honor the GNU work, or he will immediately withdraw those that are from the party who are in the GNU, so that we are seeing action. Then later on, he must set up structures to contest elections on his own and stop being under the state of the African National Congress.
To expand further on this, we're joined by political analyst Lukhona Mnguni. Lukhona, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, we've just listened to the ANC Youth League President Collen Malatji essentially daring the SACP to withdraw their deployees from government and contest the elections independently. Is this a sign that the tripartite alliance is crumbling? What should we make of his remarks?
A very good evening to you and a good evening to the viewers. I mean, he's probably more fuel to the fire and, of course, misleading the political conversation in some ways. The SACP does not have deployees in the GNU. All leaders who happen to be appointed in the cabinet are members of the ANC and are appointed by the president of the ANC through ANC processes. And I think, I mean, this talks to the difficulty of the tripartite alliance over the years. Remember, what I think we are seeing here is not just a moment of disaffection with the GNU itself as a concept from the General Secretary of the SACP. I think there's much greater frustration. Last night, I think it was Dr. Alex Mashilo speaking to your colleague, Natasha Piri, explaining how they feel they were snubbed in the conversations that took place, and that they were meant to be part of the technical team and the negotiation team, but that was never to be. And we need to hear the ANC's side of the story as to how far true that is. Because remember, over the years, the SACP and COSATU have been calling for the reconfiguration of the tripartite alliance. So there's always been some dissatisfaction with how the alliance is currently configured, because these two, and maybe you may argue Sanko too, feel that they don't have enough say and influence over the ANC. And I think what we are seeing is a realization that the ANC has found potentially new tripartite alliance partners.
Would you say the SACP has, as a result, been treated as a lesser partner?
Well, they've always been the lesser partner because they don't contest elections. They can only lobby and try and influence the ANC. The ANC is an autonomous organization from the SACP. It exists for its own, interests and advancement. And it has a different, ideological outlook to the SACP. I mean, the SACP, true to its name, is a communist party. The ANC is not a communist political party. It even calls itself a broad church. So it's a welcoming and inviting party. It may well describe itself as having a bias to the working class, while the SACP calls itself the vanguard of the working class. So these two parties don't exist for the same political purpose, but they benefit from a mutual partnership that allows the other to feed off one another. But I think that, and I said this in 2010 already, that the SACP is potentially dead and a carcass of its former self, and its ability to influence the ANC intellectually in terms of its revolutionary morality and otherwise has completely dissipated, because in part some of the SACP leaders have been swallowed into the machinery of the ANC itself.
So would you say, given what you're saying now on the back of those remarks, that the ANC Youth League can afford to make such a dare if we also have to take stock of the outcome of the May 29 elections?
Well, not at all. I mean, this day comes literally a day after Nehau and the provincial secretary of KwaZulu-Natal have been made to smoke a peace pipe, over some of the remarks that, they have exchanged between the other. But what it tells you is that there is complete incoherence within the ANC. And I don't think only within the ANC. I think among different political parties, what the election outcome of the 29th of May has done is to really crystallize people's differences and approaches to power when you don't have enough numbers for you to be in power. And I am sure as things develop, we will see, in different sections of different political parties, disagreements probably crystallizing. I mean, if you look into the Democratic Alliance, you've got issues that are between the national leadership and the leadership in Gauteng, which has left the DA out of the government of the Gauteng province. So I don't think these are matters only unique to the ANC, but for the ANC, they are probably much more dire, because the ANC is already in such a precarious condition. And a day like that one, I think Collen might remember, in 2016, the ANC and the SACP actually did contest one another in the Metsimahulu local municipality. And you ended up there with a coalition government with an SACP mayor at some point. So I'm trying to say, I mean, when you make daring statements of this nature, when we know that the SACP had even threatened to potentially contest the 2024 elections if the alliance is not reconfigured, means that you may well have many more fragments of the ANC on different ballot papers across different municipalities come 2026. So it would be unwise for people to probably agitate for a much more greater breakup of the ANC and its hangers-on that try to really propel it to some meaningful, galvanization of society during election periods.
Yeah, absolutely. Malatji has also called on the EFF to make considerations in joining the GNU. In fact, he referred to former deputy EFF leader Floyd Shivambu as the stumbling block. What do you make of this?
Well, that's just a view of a politician, because I mean, I get to hear many more different versions as to why and how the EFF would have been left off the table of considerations. Other people say that the stumbling block was the president of the EFF himself, and in terms of making high stakes demands. If you listen to Mdumiseni Nduli, we did a public webinar that I moderated with one of the ANC branches, and he spoke about, the EFF saying in a meeting with the ANC that, they would then build the EFF out of the ashes of the ANC. And he says, how do you go into a coalition arrangement with a party that is already, predicting your death and ashes? So, I mean, it depends where you get the narrative from. And these are politicians. They pit one another against the other, and then they pit each other against society to at times try and create multiple narratives. So I would say that's just politicking. We know that the EFF started on a very high level of demands before elections in terms of how they would go into the negotiations with the ANC. We know that there is a serious clash between the Democratic Alliance and the EFF, the Democratic Alliance pronouncing the EFF as would be a doomsday coalition partner to the ANC. They also had their own view as to whether the EFF should be in the room or not. So I think we must really see the complex nature of the arrangements and the dislike that exists among other parties beyond just saying the GNU is open to everybody. Because, I mean, the statement is interesting. I mean, in the press briefing of the ANC itself, they spoke about the possibility of the GNU evolving. Evolving to what direction and how? Because in a way, you've already locked in the GNU by the mere fact of appointing people. The only way you can evolve the GNU is if you are saying there are people who would have to be removed from their seats to make way for others in cabinet in particular. And I mean, that comes with its own political risks. And I don't think that the president, because ultimately all these people who are talking, they don't even have the powers to evolve the GNU. It will be the president who must make considerations as to whether or not to evolve the GNU, and he would have to make political calculations as to that action, whether it will affect the sentiment that has been said to be good and supportive of the GNU across the country.
Yeah. We've watched the rise and fall of the ANC Youth League over the years, and what would you make of Malatji's remarks in the manner in which he's trying to reposition the voice of the ANC Youth League?
Well, look, is that the ANC Youth League is still dead. It's been dead since 2012.
Yeah.
What we have are people who are in positions in a structure that is called the leadership structure of the Youth League. But it has no compelling political program. It has no animating idea amongst young people. It has no proactive agenda in terms of influencing debate and policy positions for young people. It appears not to have no constructive agenda either. So at times, I often say the existence of a structure does not necessarily mean the existence of the essence of what the Youth League of 1944 envisaged to be its influence. I mean, this Youth League is more co-opted by the, mother body of the ANC rather than it trying to influence, transformation of the mother body, trying to influence the political navigation ability of the ANC, which is what the Youth League was purposely driven to do in 1944, achieved much of it in 1948 and continuously after that. Now we see a Youth League that is preoccupied by spats of elders within the ANC rather than crafting a very clear agenda for young people, but also for the ANC, and to demonstrate that indeed the Youth League itself may have worthy leaders who can replace some leaders in the ANC to give it more life and more direction, rather than calling upon the SACP to say, look, let the SACP, if they can get us back to 60%, they should be preoccupied about what are they doing as the Youth League to ensure that there's less apathy amongst young people, or at least not apathy, less disinterest in political processes, particularly electoral politics. That's what the Youth League should be preoccupied about. Unfortunately, I am not seeing any of those things coming out clearly.
Yeah, neither have I. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Of course, summing up some of the big political talking points, political analyst Lukhona Mnguni.